Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Tonight we're reading from the 11th canto, as promised, the Ila Gita. And we picked a verse at the end of the chapter of the Ila Gita, which corresponds, the verse corresponds to the way the Pingala Gita ended. So as we did with the Pingala Gita, we will start at the end and then go to the beginning. Vaitasenastatokyevam Arvasya Lokanishpriha Mukta Sango Mahimeta Atmaramas Chacharaha Vaitasenastatokyam Urvasya Lokanishpriha Mukta Sango Mahimeta Atmaramas Chacharaha Vaitasenastatokyam Urvasya Lokanishpriha Mukta Sango Mahimeta Atmaramas Chacharaha Vaishnavis. Vaitasena, King Pururava, Tatapi, for that reason, Hevam, Urvasya, of Urvashi, Loka, of being on the same planet, Nishpriha, freed from the desire, Mukta, liberated. Sangha, from all material association. Mahim, the earth. Etam, this. Atma Arama, self-satisfied. Chachara, he traveled. Ha, indeed. Translation. Thus, losing the desire to be on the same planet as Urvashi, Maharaj Parura began to wander the earth, free of all material association and completely satisfied within the self. Om Chiranandasya Gyananjana Shalakaya Chakshurtamina Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha. Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhara Shri Vasadi Gaura Bhakta Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare. He actually lost the desire. How is that possible? In Bhagavad Gita, what does Krishna say? Matasmitya Jnanamapohanam cha. From me comes all knowledge, remembrance, and forgetfulness. So as we often discuss, Krishna helps you not only to remember, but he also helps you to forget. We're so powerless that we can't even forget without Krishna's help. Krishna helps the devotee to remember him. Even at the time of death, if the devotee who has served him all his life, her life, becomes disorientated due to physiological conditions that are prominent at the time of death. Do you think Krishna will forget you? No. He will force himself into your consciousness. He'll help you to remember him. And if you want to be absorbed in material life, Krishna will help you remember all your desires from countless births. And if you want to forget Krishna, you can't do that unless he helps you. This is how tiny and powerless we are. We have the power to desire, but Krishna must help fulfill that desire. So it actually happens to whatever degree. If you want to forget about Krishna and absorb yourself in material life, then you need Krishna's help to forget all about him. For the devotee, Krishna helps you to forget your material desires. That is bhakti mysticism. So you are all endeavoring on the path of genuine mysticism. You're mystics. And sometimes when people look at you, they're astonished. What's happened? You seem to have forgotten something crucial. And they are right. A bhakti yogi forgets the urge to present himself, herself, as the enjoyer and the controller. And therefore, there's peace for such a bhakti yogi. As soon as you endeavor on the path of trying to be the enjoyer and controller, which seems so normal because everyone's doing that, then you must be disturbed. You must be in anxiety. But you cannot stop trying to be the enjoyer and controller unless you have something positive in its place. In the case of Purva, just like Pingala, he is reviving his relationship with Paramatma, the Lord of knowledge. He finally became detached from her. You heard yesterday how he was just literally gone mad. Now he's completely satisfied within the self because he's turned his focus onto the Supreme Self. So where are we beginning now? He, due to yajna, pleasing Vishnu and the demigods, he was able to go to where Urvashi was, to Gandharva Loka. But what happened? First, let's remind you of the end of the Pingala Gita. Remember, it's the Avadhuta Brahmana who's presenting all this. Thus, her mind completely made up to be detached. Pingala cut off all her sinful desires to enjoy sex pleasure with lovers, and she became situated in perfect peace. Just like Baruva at the end of the Ida Gita, situated in perfect peace. Then she sat down in her bed. And the last verse, remember? Material desire is undoubtedly the cause of the greatest unhappiness. Can you accept that? The cause of the greatest unhappiness? It can't be that bad, can it? Material desire is undoubtedly the cause of the greatest unhappiness, and freedom from such desire is the cause of the greatest happiness. Therefore, completely cutting off her desire to enjoy so-called lovers, Pingala very happily went to sleep. Haribol! Now back to the Ida Gita. This chapter in 11th Canto really advocates the advantages of devotee association and the utter disadvantages of materialistic association. That is stressed in the beginning of the chapter and at the end. And in the middle, you have the Ida Gita. So we went to the end where Puruva's got some peace, detached. Now, though, we'll back up and hear his song of realization after he went to where Urvashi resided, hooked up with her again. You'd think he'd be happy, right? Let's hear what he has to say about that. It is Krishna himself who's relating this whole incident. And that incident includes, in the 11th canto, the Ida Gita. It's a song sung by Puruva. He was at first, when she left him, totally bewildered, right? But he began to control his lamentation, finally, and feel detachment. He had attained her association on Gandharva Loka, the planet of the Gandharva angels. So there's a bit of a recap here before he attained her Remember his lamentation when she left him? She left the house because he broke his stipulation, her stipulation rather. Remember? She said, always feed me food cooked in ghee, and always take care of my lambs, number 2. And number 3, never let me see you unclothed except at the time of cohabitation. And then the Gandharvas made that trick, remember? Sent by Indra. Because Indra wanted her back in his assembly. So the Gandharvas came in the middle of the night and took the lambs. And the lambs were crying out. And then Urvashi wakes up and starts slashing verbally her husband. You wimp. Remember in the beginning when she met him? You hero, oh great hero. Now you wimp, pretending to be a man. And so Puruva was, his ego, his male ego just ground to bits. He jumps up, grabs his sword, and runs out after the Gandharvas, even though he's got nothing on. He's just clothed with his sword. And then the Gandharvas said, aha, we got you. They let the lambs go and then shone brightly so that Urvashi could see he broke the deal. He broke the contract. And so she left. And you heard Puruva's mad lamentation. So now we're getting a recap before we hear the Ila Gita. He ran after her when she was leaving. Even though he was totally unclad, he's running out outside the house. Oh, my wife! Oh, terrible lady! Please stop! Oh, my wife! You don't sound very convincing, man. Ready? 1, 2, 3.
I'm my wife.
Come on, everyone together. Oh, terrible lady. Please stop.
Please stop.
You are cruel.
You're cruel.
You're taking away my life.
Take away my life.
Please stay.
Please stay.
All right. So, you remember the first concession she gave to him because he was so madly deranged? You can be with me one night of the year. So now, due to yajna, pleasing the demigods, and of course any sacrifice done for the demigods mentions Vishnu. So Puruva actually went to the planet where she was. And so what was the result? Living happily ever after, forever and ever? Kama atripto nujushan chulakan varshayamani navedayantir nayantir urvasya kista chaitana. This is the bottom line. Although for many years Puruva had enjoyed sex pleasure in the evening hours, still he was not satisfied by such insignificant enjoyment. So now we're going to hear how the days and nights were passing, and Puruva didn't even notice because he was so absorbed in Urvashi. The Bhagavatam says his mind was so attracted to Urvashi that he did not notice how the nights were coming and going. This is the nature of material existence, that the illusion swallows us up and we just lose track of how our whole life is passing by, is being expended. And actually, people want to forget about how they're getting old, how their life is coming to an end. You have children, and then the children have children. You play with your grandchildren and feel young that way. You don't want to think that life is coming to an end. Shukadeva Goswami explains in the second canto of Bhagavatam, Ayur Hadati Vaikusa, Ujjanastam Janasahu. Both by the sun's rising and setting, it diminishes the life of everyone, except for the one who is glorifying Krishna. The way to conquer over death is through glorifying Krishna. So this is a very significant insight into what happened to Pururava. The days and nights just passed without his noticing. His mind was so absorbed in her. The nights were coming, the nights were going. Now he begins his Gita. Aila Uvacha. Aho me moha stara. Alas, just see the greatness of my illusion. This goddess was embracing me and held my neck in her grip. Can you demonstrate that, holding the neck in your grip? Sounds like real power, doesn't it? This goddess was embracing me and held my neck in her grip. My heart was so polluted by lust that I had no idea how my life was passing. His life is just being spent. That lady cheated me so much that I didn't even see the rising or setting of the sun. For so many years, I passed my life in that way. He wasn't even conscious the sun was going up or the sun was going down. As they say these days, he was really into it. So Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur writes in his commentary that his loss of memory is presented in this way of using the rising and setting of the sun as an example. He was totally bewildered, his memory gone. So when the sun set, he was sleeping. And when the sun rose, he was sleeping. He was not aware whether the sun existed or not. So focused was he on his activities with Urvashi. He didn't know how many years had passed. He goes on to say, Aho me atma sammoha. Sammoha. I was totally bewildered. I'm supposed to be a mighty emperor, the crown jewel of all the kings on the earth. But I've become what? Krida Mriga, a toy animal in her hands. He's bewildered by his own body. And because of being bewildered by his own body, he's become like a pet animal, her pet animal. And then he describes his ego, the famous male ego. I was a powerful lord with great opulence, but that woman gave me up. Just like I were nothing more than a blade of grass. She did that to me. Many men recite, she gave me up. Although I'm a powerful lord, great opulence, that woman gave me up. He describes how he followed her, crying out to her like a madman. This is what happens when we're attached to the senses. He goes on describing how his ego is totally demolished. His self-esteem is rock bottom, and that's considered a great offense today, right? If your self-esteem has plunged to the ground. Where are my so-called great influence, power, and sovereignty? Repeat. Just like an ass being kicked in the face by his she-ass. His she-ass. I ran after that woman who had already given me up. Because the question would be, you have such great influence, you have such great power, why are you so miserable? But he's describing, even though I have power, influence, and sovereignty, I'm like an ass being kicked in the face by his she-ass. So he goes on. What's the use of a big education or the practice of austerities and renunciation? What's the use of studying Dharma, of living in solitude and silence, if after all that, one's mind is stolen by such a woman? So remember, those of you who may have missed last weekend. Last weekend was Pingala Gita, in which the evils and woes of materialistic man were presented. So this weekend, it's the opposite. So we do give equal time. And he's condemning himself. You'll see that he's going to realize, why should I blame her? He's going to stop and say, it's actually me. I'm the fool. I'm the one who should be blamed. And he begins to do that in this verse. To hell with me.
To hell with me.
I am such a fool.
I am such a fool.
That I didn't even know it was good for me.
I didn't even know it was good for me.
Although I arrogantly thought I was highly intelligent. Although I achieved the exalted position of a lord. I allowed myself to be conquered by women. As if I were a bullock. Or a jackass. This would make a great drama, wouldn't it? Who would be Urvashi? Any volunteers? Radhika Bob? Remember about the foxes? Don't let the foxes bite. All right. Oh, he's not finished yet. For many years, I served the so-called nectar of her lips. Still, my lusty desires kept rising again and again within my heart. And were never satisfied. So the Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur, the Acharya, hits the point. He enjoyed that nectar of the lips for many years, but still not satisfied. So then he states his conclusion. The only way out of this mess. He describes how only the Supreme Personality of Godhead can possibly save his consciousness, because his consciousness had been stolen by this very loose woman. So he's really crying out, how will I be freed from the taste of her lips? How will I develop distaste? You see, material existence makes an impression upon us through our senses. And those senses load up the mind with vivid images that addict us. So Puruva is saying, how will I ever be freed from that impression I have in my mind caused by the taste of her lips? Only the Supreme Personality of Godhead, who's known as Adokshita, who is beyond the range of material senses, and who is the Lord of all self-satisfied sages. Only he can save my consciousness, which has been stolen by this loose woman. Now remember, Urvashi did tell him, be detached. She gave him good advice. Don't waste your life in this way, chasing after me. But he couldn't hear it. And he's remembering that now. He's starting to blame himself. Because I allowed my intelligence to become dull, and because I failed to control my senses, the great confusion in my mind didn't go away. Even though Urvashi herself gave me wise advice, with well-spoken words, he's remembering he didn't listen. Her lessons in detachment had no effect on him. So this is how history repeats itself, the same thing again and again, because the same problem is there, uncontrolled mind and senses, causing the same problems again and again, packaged in different ways, but the same problems. How can you expect a better life for yourself and for the world if they're simply uncontrolled mind and senses? It'll just be the same thing again and again. So then Puruva directly faces the facts. How can I blame her for my trouble when I myself am so ignorant of my real spiritual nature? I did not control my senses. And so I'm like a person who mistakenly sees a harmless rope as a snake. She's not to blame, in other words. If there's a piece of rope on the ground and you see it as a snake, is it the rope's fault? No, the fault is in your perception. So he's realizing, I saw her as a sense object. The mistake is on me. Just like you can't blame a rope if someone sees the rope as a snake. Similarly, how can I blame her? I consider her to be the object of sense enjoyment. So therefore, I suffer the reactions of karma. What can a rope do to harm a person if it's just laying on the ground? How can an ignorant person find fault in the rope that's just laying on the ground? But because of ignorance, I blamed her. I blamed the rope for my misperception of it being a snake. So it's self-honesty. And then he gets a bit graphic and a bit, how do we say, biological in his presentation of the sense object. First, he talks about the body. 1 minute, he's explaining he had such a difficult time breaking away from the addiction to the nectar of her lips. And now, as he's regaining his sanity, what does he say about her body that he was so focused upon? What is this polluted body anyway?
What is this polluted body anyway?
So filthy and full of bad odors.
So filthy and full of bad odors.
I was attracted by the fragrance and beauty
I was attracted by the fragrance and beauty
of a woman's body.
of a woman's body.
But what are those so-called attractive features?
But what are the so-called attractive features?
They are simply a false covering
That's simply a false covering
created by illusion.
created by illusion.
So when you look into the situation more deeply, what he's saying is that he projected onto her all kinds of attractive features when actually the reality of her body is like a bag of, like any human body, it's a bag of stool, gas, bile, mucus, hairs, and other stuff that you flush down this toilet. So it sounds disgusting. And he's come to that realization. I projected onto her a different reality. It was due to my projecting on her the illusion that she's like an amusement park. That's my fault. Regardless of the coverings, when you go beneath the skin, what do you find? Just all kinds of obnoxious substances. So it's my fault. I applied with my mind these delusions upon her. That's the point. So why should I blame her? It's my uncontrolled mind. Then he presents factual evidence about who does the body belong to. This is there in the 6th canto. The departed son of Chitraketu, by the influence of Narada Muni, comes back to the body briefly that he departed from and tells his parents, why are you lamenting? In which life are you my parents? I've had many parents in many different lifetimes in many different bodies. Isn't the situation such that we're like persons who go to a hotel amidst their journey, stay overnight, meet some people, and then the next morning everyone separates? Isn't family life like that? So who does the body actually belong to? Whose property is it? Just think, your body. Who owns it? Does it belong to your parents? Whose cohabitation produced the material body? Shouldn't they own the body? Or the mother who's given birth to it? Does it belong to one's partner who may give the body pleasure? Does it belong to your employer? Dayani Rama, does your body belong to Westpac? Not yet. She's at work. Does your body belong to Westpac? Wrong bank. She works for ANZ. Okay. Is the body the property of the cremation fire? Oh, think about that. Or does the body belong to dogs and jackals who may ultimately gobble it up if you die in a solitary place, walking in the forest or the mountains? Does the body belong to friends who encourage and help it? It's so difficult to ascertain who the real proprietor, material proprietor of the body is. Still, you become most attached to it, right? Never mind who it belongs to, it's mine. So Puruva, in his Ayala Gita, goes on to explain that the material body is a polluted material form heading toward a lowly destination. Yet, even though your body is a polluted form heading for a lowly destination, when you stare at the face, he says this, when you stare at the face of a woman, he thinks, what a good-looking lady.
What a good lady.
Look at that charming nose. Just see her smile.
Just see her smile.
So what does it mean that the polluted material form is heading towards a lowly destination? It means that if the body is buried, what happens to it? Gets eaten by worms. If it's burned, what happens? Ashes. If it drops dead in a lonely place, what happens? Dogs and vultures and jackals eat it. So using a bit of Sankhya or analytical approach, you can understand what's going on is that Maya Shakti, the illusory energy of Maya, enters into both the male form and the female form and creates this buzz. So therefore, the mind of the man, the mind of the woman becomes bewildered. You start hallucinating by the mercy and empowerment of mind. You see things in the other person, the prospective partner. This is the mercy of Maya. You become empowered to see these hallucinations. And you forget all about what you want to embrace. What you want to embrace is a bag containing all these things we talked about. So this is the Bhagavatam's analysis, meant to produce detachment. In other words, Prabhupada is not saying these things just to gross you out or make he's not trying to be repulsive. He's being analytical and pointing out to us the reality so that we'll become detached. He's not finished in that kind of analysis. He says, what's the difference between persons who try to enjoy this material body and ordinary worms? Worms do the same thing. They try to enjoy their material bodies made of skin, flesh, blood, muscle, fat, marrow, bone, stool, urine, and pus. The worms enjoy in their wormy bodies, and humans try to enjoy in their human bodies. You say, what's the difference? You see that Prabhupada is coming to his senses in his song, and he's becoming detached. He's understanding that the mind is the material mind is always accompanied by 6 enemies. This is something that devotees always wonder about in the beginning stages and the intermediate stages. My mind, my mind, my mind. But material mind always has its associates. Lust, anger, greed, madness, envy, and illusion. How do you get around that? Materially, you cannot. You can temporarily repress it, sit in a corner and meditate on your breath. Will temporarily repress all that, but it just pops up again. The only way you can effectively deal with that mad mind and its 6 associates is to fix your mind on a higher level. That's why Krishna twice in Bhagavad Gita said, Mamana Bhava Bhakta. Always become my devotee by always thinking of me. Always thinking of Krishna means always thinking of Krishna's service. How to expand Krishna's glories. How to improve Krishna's service. That's always thinking of Krishna. And in that way, your mind becomes purified gradually. So we have to have a practical, pragmatic understanding of the way the material mind works. It's not alone. It's got 6 associates. It's just the way it is. So you can't deal with the mind and its associates materially. You'll never get peace that way. You'll just get a temporary peace. And then the mind, the material mind and its 6 associates let you know that they've never gone away. So don't despair engage the mind in Krishna activities, especially chanting Hare Krishna. So Purva began to understand, as Krishna himself is relating, he began to understand that the super soul is within his heart. And in this way, he had transcendental knowledge that cleared away his illusion, and he finally achieved peace.